Welcome back to Shop Talk for Season 5. I'm Brandi.
And this is James, and we talk about all things related to mental health and cross-cultural workers.
So glad you're here. Welcome to Shop Talk today. We're going to talk to MaDonna Mauer. I'm really glad to have you with us, MaDonna.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you a little introduction so you guys know a little bit about MaDonna. After graduating from university, MaDonna began her cross-cultural work as a teacher for a Christian international school in China. She quickly learned about TCKs through her work and even more from her German MK husband, Uwe. Together, they have 3 adult TCKs. They moved to Taiwan a few years after their middle child was diagnosed with Cri-du-Chat Syndrome. MaDonna has an MA in care and counseling and works as a short-term counselor with Global Crossroads Consulting, helping clients and families in all kinds of transitions. She is currently a PhD candidate in the International Studies Department at Columbia International University, researching the lived experiences of missionary families who have a child with disabilities. MaDonna, Uwe, and their middle daughter still reside in Taiwan. All right. Again, we're glad to have you here. We do want to talk to you about what it's like for cross-cultural families, like you said, the lived experience of cross-cultural families working cross-culturally with a child with disabilities. I wonder if you would start us out just talking about your experience and what it's been like for you guys.
Yeah, of course. So our daughter is now 21. We were living in China when she was born, and when I was pregnant, she was really small, so they didn't know what was wrong. So I had a high risk pregnancy with her, and had to go in every week just to make sure she was still growing. When she was born, the doctors, no one, they didn't notice anything different about her except she was really small and tiny, but she seemed to be okay. So that first year was pretty rough though, because she kept getting sick. She had, like, we were in the hospital a couple of times with pneumonia and bronchitis. And then when she was 7 months old, we almost lost her. She had really bad pneumonia, and we were taken to a small hospital in the city that we were living in at the time. And they didn't have the rooms where we had the oxygen levels could be checked and all of that. So we were life flighted to Beijing, where they had all of that. And so they thought she might have cystic fibrosis because she had all of these lung infections. And they said, but in Asia, that's not a common disease. And so they don't have reliable testing because of that. So I took her to the States at that time. And we just began trying to figure out what is wrong. So we saw a neurologist, and they thought she had muscle issues because she was about 7 months old, and she knew who everybody was in the room and what it was very aware of her surroundings, but she couldn't sit up. She could roll over and do those things. So he really thought it was probably her nerves. Then a pediatrician saw her and said, have you had a chromosome test done? And we said, no, but we actually were recommended to do that. And so we did that. And then that's how it came up that she had Cri-du-Chat syndrome, or 5p minus. So what that is she's missing part of her 5th chromosome, the P arm. She's got about 75% of it's gone. And the geneticist told us right then that she'd be right in the middle. It's a spectrum of different, they're all spectrums. But anyway, so she's on the spectrum. And so we really thought we would probably need to stay in the States. My husband is German. And so for me, it'd be going back, but for him and for our family, be moving to the States. But the doctors and the therapist all said there's no reason why you can't go back. I was not working at the time. I was at home with the kids. And so she was also given a feeding tube at the time too, because she couldn't swallow. And that's what was causing all of the lung infection. So we went back to China, and I had extra feeding tubes. We had feeding bags. We had homework of what we could do to help her with therapy. She's a year old at this time. We found a therapist in Hong Kong, and there was an overnight train. So about every 3 months, I would take her to Hong Kong for checkups to just make sure we were still continued, get the homework, go back home the next day. We found a speech therapist, and so she started helping us as well down there. And then about when she hit 2, she got really angry and would start banging her head. And so the speech therapist informed us that it's her speech. She wants to communicate, but she doesn't know how. And so we needed more speech therapy. And that's when we moved to Taiwan. And so really we began this journey of being parents. And I think the hardest part for us was moving to Taiwan because we weren't expecting we expected to stay in China and just continue doing what we wanted, what we were doing, but God had a different plan. And I think so many times, I think parents who have a child with disabilities come across that as, oh, wait, life isn't what we expected it to be. Maybe a dream dies, maybe their dream for their child dies, and so they have to let that go. But they go through this, I think, transition period where the new normal. And then once you get to the new normal, it's like everything is beautiful again. So we've been in Taiwan now since 2006, and Mateo went to a Taiwanese elementary school because in their special ed department, because there are no missionary schools or international schools that have a special ed department in Taiwan. So I think that's a big factor for many parents as well, is finding education for their kids. Fortunately, our daughter understood Chinese, so she fit right in and did that, graduated, and is now in a day program for adults with intellectual disabilities now, and has been she's in her second year doing that and loves it. We love it too.
I think for a lot of families, it can be actually quite traumatic, that whole process of discovery. We think of trauma as an experience that overwhelms your ability to cope and has deep and long-lasting impacts. There's also just the trauma aspect of finding out something's not right and then navigating medical cross-culturally sometimes, multilingual sometimes. That is just so stressful on the whole family because you have perhaps in your case other kids, and in that initial phase when they discover on the field, it's just so challenging. And sometimes those losses and trauma aren't always processed because you have the ongoing needs of the child that don't subside.
Yeah, of course. I think so. And I think so many people don't know what to do with your grief that you're having, or a child with disabilities. And so they don't really know how to help or how to walk alongside you. And so I feel like that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this study, is that trying to figure out what do families need, what do they want, and then relaying that to the organizations and the sending
Mm.
churches so that they can come alongside and help. Because I think it's those early years when they first get the diagnosis that are really rough.
Yeah. Tell us about your research.
So I'm doing a phenomenological study, which is basically just looking at people's lives and getting to know their lives better. So I'm doing it through interviews. So I have about 20 interviews, about 11 or 12 moms, and about 8 dads. And I'm just asking them questions about what is their experience. So I want to hear their story of how the diagnosis. So I get that. I get to listen to how were they supported by their mission organizations in the beginning? Was the ongoing support that they've had with their sending churches? What was good? What was bad? What would they wish they could have had? Those types of questions. I've even gone into their theology of disability. Like, did they have it before? Did they even think about it?
Right.
I know I didn't. I didn't think about that until I had a child. So just
Mhm.
that, and then how did it change, and how is that affecting yourself? How does it affect your marriage? How did it affect the other children? How does it affect your day-to-day life? And just those kinds of questions. So I'm trying to get like a good holistic approach, just not just how has it been and tell me what they could do better, just bigger picture.
MaDonna, what have you noticed so far in the interviews that you're collecting? Are there any themes that stick out to you and such?
Yes, today I was just talking with someone and I just said, the one thing that I'm finding is that God provides. His provision is just amazing for me to hear their stories and the things that they've needed, and how the Lord has come around through just various ways, whether it's a person in their life that showed up out of nowhere, or they received a package that they needed, or just it's just been amazing to see God's provision.
From our experience, when our son was diagnosed, there was a pediatric neurologist who lived in a neighboring Central Asian country that my husband was able to fly with our son to visit this American pediatric neurologist, and that was huge for us. That was like
Yeah, that's
it was like
amazing.
it was like the Lord just saying, "I see you. I see you in this," and that was helpful.
Yeah.
Have you noticed differences so far, and how maybe husbands and wives respond?
Yeah, I do. for the most part, I feel like, husbands are very logical. I haven't thought a lot about it, but what I've been getting is that they're very logical, and here's how it went down, and here's how it was hard for me, and here's how it was. They're just very logical about it. The women tend to give me more of their emotions a little bit, not all of them, but there have been more of that, I think, and just how they processed a bit more about it. But I've appreciated the men because they've been real. It's not like they've not touched on their emotions, but they've told me, but they didn't show them, which I think is fine because, yeah.
Also, how male stereotypes exist for a reason.
Exactly. And we need us both.
That's right.
Yeah, I
Good
can
balance.
confirm from our experience too. That was one of our major things is how we both grieved and processed at the beginning. It was very different. So.
Yeah.
I wonder if you've noticed any changes in how just the cross-cultural community of workers responds or sending organizations. I guess this is a pretty broad question, how they all respond
Mhm.
to families with children of disabilities.
Or
I
or even
really,
that's changed over time.
Right.
yes. Yeah. So I think mission organizations are now accepting that it's happening.
Mm.
That I think, I mean, when Mateo was diagnosed, we really thought we would have to leave the field. We thought they're not going to let us come back. They're, the school that we worked for. But when all the doctors were like, why not? Medically wise, she's fine. You've got what you need. You have questions, email us or whatever. And so, looking back, I'm very thankful that the school didn't tell us no and allowed us. And I've heard that, but now people, and I think that's the other thing. When we were looking at going with a different mission organization, we thought, we'd tell them we have a child with special needs. Immediately, the answer is no, we don't have the resources. But there are a few that are okay with it. And so I think the doors are starting to open and say, you know what, there are resources out there. There are so much online that they can do. We can outsource. We don't have to provide everything, but we do need to look at it holistically and make sure that the child's not going to suffer or the other kids are going to suffer, that they get the support that they need. So I think I do see it opening, the doors opening a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's that the impact on everybody that's sometimes hard to know ahead of time. So there's the two thing. There's the new families who are coming who perhaps have already navigated those hard parts of adjustment and now they're looking to go overseas. And then there's the ones who are starting a family, growing their family overseas. So there's really two different parts. I mean, I got a request yesterday for care for a young man who's just diagnosed with autism, and
Mm.
there's just a huge range of what all could happen and be a part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I just think it needs to be it's worth having those conversations for both the sending organization, onboarding somebody new, and looking at what are places they could go that could support not just the kid, but also the whole family in that context. And then how do we support somebody who this happens to on the field? And do you have a thought about those two kind of different, the evaluation, but also the care for people already on the field?
Yeah, a little bit. I think one, if a mission organization is for sure they know they can't handle it, I think that's okay because
Mm,
they know who they are and they know what their limits are. I think that's better. I don't want to say that's better, but to have an organization is like, yes, we'll send you wherever you want to go. I don't think that's irresponsible. I mean, I'm
right.
sure I don't know of a mission organization that does that, but I'm sure there are some personally. But
Let's not
so
name
I
names.
think, yeah, no, we're
That's
not going
good.
to name names. But I do think an organization, if they would, before they say no, do some researching and be like, where could they go? Where are they wanting to go? What is there? And just being willing to slow the process down and check out the location a little bit more and not just, opening the door wide, but cracking it open and say, let's explore it. Let's be curious.
I also wonder about having some ongoing ways to evaluate because you may go to an international school that has a special education teacher who's really good with the unique needs of your child, and then after 2 years they leave. So
Right.
it's an ongoing conversation, hopefully.
Well, I had.
Definitely, definitely.
Mm.
Um, I think, I think you're. specifically your missionary kids schools or your Christian schools, I don't know how to say this nicely.
Just say it.
Just say it.
There needs to be room at the table.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if there's not room at the table, yeah.
Yeah.
We need to rethink that. And I know that, many say they don't have the money. Yeah, that might be true, but you would be surprised who would want to support that financially for just that department.
We had that experience where when we lived in Germany, and it was a fantastic school, but we were pioneering. We had the first child with significant physical disabilities, and so
Right.
trying to advocate and educate with people who wanted to understand, but oftentimes were not getting it, was pretty frustrating at times.
Mm.
I remember we had this experience where after our son was diagnosed, we felt like, of course, we're going back to the field. We went home for his full diagnosis and stuff to the States. And the doctors gave us the go ahead. But there was also just a lived experience on the field that we weren't really prepared for. Just the day to day, like James had mentioned, living cross culture with another kid that we cared deeply for. We wanted both of our kids to thrive, which looked differently, living in that context, in the stressful context. And it was hard. And I wish we'd have had I don't know, the sense about us to just give ourselves permission to reevaluate every few months. Like, how are we doing? We weren't doing well. I'll tell you that. I wonder if you could just talk about that some too.
Yeah, there was when we were in China, it was a year to year. We evaluated every single year. Could we stay? Could we not stay? And it was that second year they were like, nope, we need to go. But where should we go? And we thought, well, at that time we had adopted a little girl, and we really loved the Asian context and just how, my husband grew up in Taiwan. He's a missionary kid himself. So I thought we really wanted to stay in Asia. So we just started looking at where is English speaking schools, where could we get, education. Anyway, so when Taiwan opened up, we kind of left. We came over and everything was, they had speech therapy, they had the therapy. It was excellent care that she got when she was here. So, but yeah, I think, and then we were evaluating even while we were here in Taiwan, we would evaluate every year until she got her feeding tube taken out. And then we thought, okay, we've gone, but now we're back to evaluating every year because she's graduated, she's an adult. And is it time to go? Is it time to we stay longer? How much longer? So I do think you have to evaluate that for sure. It would be nice to have someone ask the right questions or just have questions to ask to help us process that. I think that would have been helpful, would be helpful now. As we're going through that now again, I think that would be helpful just to, not that somebody has to have the answers, but just to ask the right questions to help us figure that out.
Yeah, question for both of you. I mean, what are some of those questions, especially when you consider, you mentioned spectrum, and it really is both the physical challenges, mental challenges. There's just a huge range. What are the questions to be asking about fit and health and location and timing? And what are some of those things that are good to be considering?
Well, I think the first one is medical. Are there any medical issues that have to be taken care of? And if there are, what are the hospitals like and can they take care of it? And like in Taiwan, a lot of the doctors in Taipei all spoke English. So I didn't have even that second language. I could talk to them in English and it was okay for those. Now, not always, but most of the time. So I think that's the first thing to look at is that. I think that's ultimately. The second one is education. Is there a school? Are you equipped to do a homeschool? Is there an education? Does your mission have like an educator consultant who can come in and test and help you with curriculum? Those kind of questions, those things. And then I think the third is the siblings. Are the siblings getting what they need as well? I think one other thing that's been coming up is that I think is, especially during those first initial period where everything is unrest, if you've gotten the diagnosis when you're on the field, is there anybody who can come and live with you and help you take care of your family, that knows your kids, that knows the culture a little bit, who can cook and clean? Can you hire someone to come and cook and clean? Can someone give money for that, even if it's something missionaries aren't supposed to do? That's not the cultural concept, but I think that is, yeah, Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, definitely.
I
Even
would,
knowing what's available. I
yeah.
remember one time I was working at I spent once a week at a international school when I was in Kenya serving as a counselor,
Uh-huh.
and the whole country ran out of ADHD meds for about 3 months. So that was pretty hectic.
Mm.
So
Oh boy. Yeah.
teachers were like, "What is happening?" But as far as you can predict, like some of those medical stuff, whether it's language, it's what's available, what's if everything's right, what's available, if everything's wrong, what's available, those kinds of things are significant.
I think too, just like having a checklist for your own family, like how
Mhm.
are we doing? How's our margin? Are we
Yep.
like, losing our temper more?
Yep.
I remember like with our sons, a kid knocked him down. It didn't mean to, but I just like lost it. Because our son would have, when he was walking, he would have really hard falls because he couldn't catch himself.
Right.
And I just lost it. And I thought, well, I'm not doing well. So, and so just those kind of things too, like, what are your stress levels? Where are you carrying stress in your body? Just kind of reevaluating those things could be a good picture.
Mm, that is good.
You mentioned siblings
Mm.
of children with disabilities, and I wonder just, yeah, what are your thoughts about how to support them well?
Oh, that is a really good question. I was shared with someone at another conference that, you know, we all think the grieving and all of that is TCK stuff. If they are a sibling to a child, a sibling, their sibling has disabilities, and mom and dad has had to focus. 80% of their focus time has had to be on the child with disabilities. Some of that grief could be because they're a sibling and a TCK. Not that the parents are at fault, but I think that is something that's reality is that sometimes that child needs a lot more attention because they need to be watched and all of that. So I think one of the things that's really helpful is if there are people in the community that the parents trust, if they can take the child with, for instance, for us, if they could take Matea so that we could just spend time with the other two and going to do something that's normal, just going out to eat, because that sometimes has been really hard with our daughter. She's very sensitive to any of the temples and anything that looks like a god. So like we love Thai food, but we can't go into the restaurant sometimes because they have their decorations up and she associates that and it scares her.
Mm.
And so she won't go in. And so then it's embarrassing for anyone. So if just having someone to be with her so we can do fun stuff with the other two, that would be great. I think that's helpful. Taking them out one on one and just having a daddy daughter date or something like that. I think that's helpful. I think it's just being I don't want to say intentional because I think that's the catchphrase word that everyone uses now, but just spending time with them and yeah, listening to them. I think that's a big one.
And you might have to schedule it or look back and have a way of tracking it to make sure it's happening. Because I think in the chaos of surviving or just the time that is really needed for the kid with some disabilities, it's easy just to lose track of. I mean, families that already have 4 or 5 kids struggle with that anyway, and then you add the complications of special needs, and you've got to really make sure it's happening.
And
Yeah.
I imagine as the parent's grief evolves, as you learn more about the illness and just go through different stages of life, that also happens with the siblings too.
Mm,
So I think it's, like you said, a good idea to be intentional about checking in with them.
yeah. I've heard other siblings just say that sometimes they grieve well, I just wanted an older sister, or I just
Mm.
wanted a younger or an older brother, and they're not the older sibling I am. And so I've heard that from several siblings that were the younger one, just wishing they had the older brother or the older sister, um, and wondering what life would have looked like that. So yeah,
And they might feel guilty for feeling that way too. So giving
Mm.
them permission to say those
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. I think that's very important.
Thinking about what a potential change that results in a need for an exit back to a home country or a home context, what would you say are some of those things to be looking into? I think a lot of the families I work with, it's trying to plan out what are the needs of that end of that child as they approach whatever entering adulthood looks like. Sometimes there's new needs that are no longer able to be met, or I think a lot of the kids I work with that are on at least the autism spectrum, it's thinking more about the help they'll need in launching. And launching looks really different, and it's not always a university. Sometimes it's in other things. But
Right.
how how would you encourage families to start looking at that kind of transition and when they might need to look at going back?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think one of the things I would probably do if I was in that situation, because I don't have a good answer because I don't work in that special ed department so much, but just networking. Who
Mm,
else do I know who has a child on the autism spectrum? Even if they're in the States already, what are things that you've done? Again, it's a big spectrum, but trying to find networking to find other parents who are also launching their children. What did they do to help them get there? And I think you got to start probably in upper elementary, and that's the goal. You got to have the goal early and then baby steps to get there, of course. But yeah, but I think cross culturally, then you just have to think, okay, here's ways that we can do that depending on where they're at on the spectrum. If they're able to function independently on their own, then, you know, what are skills that they have? Can those skills be learned here in this country in a way that can transpose into whatever home country, whatever passport country they're going to be in? I think that's the bigger question to ask. And if they're in school, then maybe if they're in a more if they're from a Western, that's another key. If they're from a Western passport country and they're in a Western setting, cultural school, then it might transpose easily. But if they're not, then it may not. So yeah, there's a lot of factors to think about.
what about other disabilities as they kind of launch into levels of more maturity or adulthood, as you've talked about with
Yeah, so that's
Leah?
kind of where we're at right now. So our daughter's 21.
Mm,
Mentally, she's about a 3 or 4 year old on a good, I would say 4 year old on a good day. My husband says she's like a 2 or 3 year old. We kind of argue on that one. She's nonverbal, but she does communicate. She understands Chinese and she understands English, and
wow.
she's well, some people say trilingual because she does sign language a little bit as well, but she does speak a little bit, but it's a lot of Chinese more than English just because it's easier for her to say. It's
Mm,
open-ended at the end. Closed sounds are really hard for her. And so we're starting to look at, okay, if we do, again, are we going to Germany or are we going to go to the States? We don't know. And then if you go to the States, which state are we going to go to? So we're looking at adult homes in the States. What do they have? Do they have day programs? So we're starting to do that research now. But again, it's all in the where are we going to land? When, because it will be a win because we can't stay here forever. We would love to, but we can't. It's just probably not possible. We don't know if it's in the next 2 years or the next 10 years, but so we've been looking at that and trying to figure out.
I imagine that lessens your stress a little bit to try to get ahead of the curve and just plan so you're not playing catch up when you get.
Except I like to know now.
I know, right?
sure helps with the anxiety.
That's the hard part is that if I just do where, then it would help. But we're open to we're going anywhere. So that's the other thing. But and she's doing really well here. So do we really need to go back yet? So that's she's able to stay, she's doing well, she's functioning. We do know that she's very social, so we cannot do like a home, like she can't be at home all day.
Yeah.
I'm not as social.
We'd love to know if you have any resources or recommendations, places to point people towards.
Yeah, there's one book out that Dina Ritchie, I think is her name. I can send you the link. You can put it in the notes later. On member care, on how to on families that have kids with special needs. She kind of did the same research I did, except she just did families that have kids with autism.
Mm.
And so she came up with so anyway, her book is really good. It's a really thin book, but it's quite resourceful. That's been probably the best resource I've got so far that I found. There was one book.
Yeah. Will you turn your research into a book?
Yes, that is the plan.
Nice.
The plan.
And MaDonna, I don't know when this is going to be published, but it our podcast may come out after your date that you want your interviews completed by, but is there a way for families to contact you?
Sure. Let's see, what's the best way? So either they can go to the Global Crossroads Consulting website and just send me an email through there, or I could. Do I want to give you my email address? That might work too. No, I
Whatever
don't
you
know.
like.
I don't know. I'm not big
I'm
on giving that out.
yeah, I'm in my PhD too. I've taken my emails off everywhere I can find.
I
Less,
know. So
more.
yeah, I think that's probably the best is the Global Crossroads
Perfect.
Consulting. Yeah, because I offer a 30-minute free and we can
Mm,
sit and chat. And yeah, that's probably the best way because then they can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
perfect.
I've enjoyed talking with you. And can I say this? Yeah, I'm going to talk with you on Sunday and interview you for your research.
Yes.
Is it okay that I can say it because it doesn't
Yes,
come in
you're
the...
saying it, not me.
Yes.
That's right. She can either confirm or deny, but you can say whatever you want.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
I look forward to talking to you more, MaDonna. And I think
Yeah.
this research is just so important and needed. I think it's just going to help families feel seen. And I think it just give them resources and hope for moving
Yeah.
forward. So I'm
Well, I hope I've been encouraged interviewing people. So,
Mhm.
um, we are, sorry, my husband works for a nonprofit here in Taiwan. It's called Taiwan Sunshine in English. And we support and encourage families in Taiwan. But we're doing a small conference next week on the March 13th, yeah, 13th through 15th in disability and ministry in Asia Pacific. And so we've got some folks coming from Thailand. We've had people from Hong Kong in the past, but we're hoping to start this up again. COVID kind of shut it down, but just getting people together so we're not reinventing the wheel. So I'm presenting a pre-conference for member care workers on how to support, understanding us and supporting us.
That sounds awesome.
Thanks for being with us, MaDonna.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
blessings on your writing, your studying, your listening, and your writing.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
It's been the same day for you because you talked to my husband last night.
Right, I did.
You're getting Welterland. Your day is sandwiched with Welterland, so God bless you for that.
Yeah, that's true.
I was named after a famous song. You share a name with a famous singer. Like, do you ever get people singing Madonna songs to you?
A year and a half in, you have figured out how to use the edit view on a Google form.
I'm gonna count that as praise. Thank you.
Hey Tracy, how's it feel that you could potentially be my dad?